Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Comic the Gathering. This is your host Jesse, as always. Today we're coming at you with another Commander 2020 Precon deck upgrade. These are my upgrades to the Timeless Wisdom Commander Precon. This is going to be the Jessica Keller Precon with the Commander Gavi Nest Warden. Do want to point out something real quick. As you can see, I'm not filming in front of my set. I'm trying a new setup. I'm going to be filming from my webcam because I have a better mic and hopefully better audio. And it also doesn't limit me on the camera that I do have is normally just this little GoPro. And while the GoPro is nice, it has about an hour of battery life, and then it shuts down, overheats, battery dies, blah, blah, blah. So, that being said, let's dive into the deck tech. Starting off with the commander itself, Gavi Nest Warden. For 2 blue, red, white, you get a 2/5 legendary creature human shaman that says you may pay 0 rather than pay the cycling cost of the first card you cycle each turn. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 red and white dinosaur cat creature token. So, basically, this is a cycling for value deck. I focused in that particular part of it and and just kind of kept it in the cycling for value line, and then did a couple little cheeky things that are going to let you play around with the cycling, and then kept synergistic lines. Let's start with the creatures. The partner pair that comes with the deck is actually really nice, fits with the deck great, so I did keep it in. The first one being Reprilian Skyshark Rider. For 3 and a red, you get a 3/3 legendary creature human shaman, partners with Shabraz the Sky Shark, and whenever you discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Reprilian Skyshark Rider, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. For paying a red, target shark gains trample until end of turn. And then Shabraz is 3 white blue for a 3/3 legendary creature Sharkbird. Love that creature type. With flying, and whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Shabraz the Sky Shark, and you gain 1 life. Pay a hybrid, white or blue. Target human gains flying until end of turn. So once you have both of these on the board, each time you cycle a card, both of them are going to get a +1/+1 counter. You will deal a point of damage to each of your opponents. You will gain 1 life. And then also they can make each other better. I really like this partner pair, and it synergizes really well in this deck. Jumping into some of the cycling creatures, we have Curator of Mysteries. 2 blue for a 4/4 Sphinx flying. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, scry 1, and then you can cycle it for 1 blue. Obviously, the scry 1 goes on the stack after you activate the cycling ability, so you're going to get to scry before you draw. It stacks together really nice. Dranith Stinger. Every time you cycle a card, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, so a nice little way to keep putting pressure on your opponent's life total. And I also really like, he kind of reminds me of Gutter Snipe. He's kind of like the Gutter Snipe of this deck, and I do love me some Gutter Snipe. Up next, Eternal Dragon. 5 white for a 5/5 flyer. You can pay 3 white, return Eternal Dragon from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only during your upkeep. But it also planes cycles for 2, meaning you can pay 2, discard the card, and search your library for a planes card, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle your library. Now, what's really nice about that is in the new set we are getting the Triomes, and the Triomes are tri-lands, but they have all 3 creature types, and this does not say a basic planes, so you can get any shock land, or you can get the Triome, or any keyworded dual land that is going to have the planes keyword on it. So, very nice. I do like that a lot. Up next, we have our big payoff for the deck. Absolutely love this. Basically, the entire reason we're kind of playing this deck is to hopefully get to this payoff, and that is Herald of the Forgotten. For 6 white, 8 mana, you get a 6/6 flying cat beast that when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, return any number of target permanent cards with cycling abilities from your graveyard back to the battlefield. So he ends up early game, cycle. Finally get to a point you can slam down Herald of the Forgotten, mass reanimation, give you a huge board, and letting you, establish yourself in the game, or even recover from a wrath. Really, really amazing card. Next, again, included in the deck, I love that he got a reprint in here, Asperia Supreme Judge, 2 white, blue, a 6/4 legendary creature Sphinx with flying. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, you may draw a card. So not only are you deterring your opponent from attacking you until they remove Asperia, but you have several things in this deck that generate a lot of tokens. So not only you're drawing, but you might be able to just chump those attacks if they do come at you. So, great card. Leave it in the deck. He's also a 6/4 flyer. That's a good threat. So, he doesn't have any sort of protection, but we'll deal with him as is. Mercurial Chemister, 3 blue-red for a 2/3 human wizard. You can pay a blue, tap him, draw 2 cards. Or you can pay a red, tap him, discard a card, and Mercurial Chemister deals damage to target creature equal to the discarded card's converted mana cost. Now, a lot of the stuff you're cycling in this deck has higher mana costs than what you're cycling it for, so that gives you a really nice piece of repeatable removal that can scale as you need it to. Also, card draw on a body, don't hate that. Nimble Obstructionist is a 2 and a blue for a 3/1 flash flying bird wizard. You can also cycle it for 2 and a blue, and whenever you cycle Nimble Obstructionist, counter target activated or triggered ability you don't control. So a nice little stifle effect when you cycle it. Niv Mizzet the Firemind is going to, for 2 blue, red, give you a 4/4 legendary creature dragon wizard with flying. Whenever you draw a card, it deals 1 damage to any target. Obviously, that is extremely powerful in this deck because the more you cycle, the more cards you're drawing, the more damage Niv is dealing. Also, the argument that maybe you could put Perun in here, Niv Mizzet Perun. The only thing is with the 3rd Keller, that his mana cost is very greedy. Triple blue, triple red. Though I'm not saying it can't be done. You definitely could pull it off. I think it would be maybe just a little bit too hard. For the deck, and it actually comes with the deck as well. 5 mana, 5 generic mana for an artifact creature horror. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand, and whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. Again, kind of just like another Niv, but generic colored, so it's not really as hard. Up next, we have probably one of the better pieces that you can add from Ikoria to the deck, and that is Riel the Everwise. Now, there are build-arounds around Riel where people are just running her as a commander. Her by herself, she's not too expensive. She's currently sitting at about $14 at time of recording, and the set's not even out yet, so I'm assuming that'll go down once the set is out. But, and this is a big but, in this deck, she does synergize well, getting +1/+0 for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard, but more importantly, whenever you discard 1 or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards. So, as you're discarding cards, for the cycling ability, for the first time each turn, which you're cycling for free off Gavi, you discard for 0 for the cycling ability, you draw a card off that, or off of Riel, and then you draw a card for the cycling ability. You just now cycled for free to draw 2. Seems really good, even though it's not doing quite all the broken things that Riel does in her own dedicated deck. And maybe if you guys comment down below if you want me to build the Riel deck, I will build a Riel deck, so you guys have a deck list if that's something you want to see. Rooting Mullock, 4 and a red, 4/4 Lizard. Whenever it enters the battlefield, exile target card with a cycling ability from your graveyard. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. Also cycles for 2. This is a nice little card that is going to add in the ability to recur some of your cycled permanents that you may want in the later game. Next we have Savai Thunderbane. For a red and a white, you get a 3/2 Elemental Cat. Whenever you cycle a card, you may pay 2. When you do, Savai Thunderbane deals 2 damage to target creature, and you gain 2 life. So it's kind of like a bad Lightning Helix, but it's on a 3/2 body. Don't hate the card, and it's going to gain you life. And I feel like this deck is going to be a little bit of a target because you're going to be doing a bunch of shenanigans for free. Up next, we have a rather controversial card in the deck. I don't think a lot of people are seeing the raw power of this card, but I think it is quite a good card, and that is Spell. So Spellpire Phoenix is a 3 red 4/2 flying Phoenix. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may return target instant or sorcery card with a cycling ability from your graveyard to your hand. At the beginning of each end step, if you cycle 2 or more cards this turn, return Spellpire Phoenix from your graveyard to your hand. So with our Blink shenanigans, this can be a nice little recursive engine. We'll get into Astral Drift and Astral Slide and Escape Protocol in a little bit, but this is a great way to recur value. So it's going to net you back your instant sorceries. Really like it. You have Portal Mage. I decided to leave this card in the deck. I just like how it plays around with the Declare Attacker step. You can cut this card for something else. If you do, the only thing that I would cut it for, in my opinion, is probably Dream Trawler from Theros Beyond Death. Having a flying hexproof creature that keeps getting, with lifelink, that keeps getting bigger each time you draw a card seems really good in a deck that's going to draw several cards in one turn. So you could go that route. I just chose to stick with the Portal Mage. Maybe I'll do that upgrade in the future. It's not necessary in my opinion, but I do think it probably would make the deck better. But I don't play with Portal Mage at all. I've never played with this card, so I wanted to try it out. Up next we have Sun Titan. Do I need to read Sun Titan? I think you guys know what Sun Titan do. 6 mana, you get a 6/6 with Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. I think you've seen a Sun Titan before. However, we have Blink shenanigans in this deck, and this is probably our best Blink target. Being able to flicker Sun Titans in and out off of our Astral stuff is going to let us rack up insane value and recurring a lot of permanents from the graveyard back to the battlefield that are cheap and overwhelm our opponent on value. Next up, we have probably one of the best cards printed in the deck. One of the few cards that I would like to get an additional copy of to put into another deck. I want to put this card also into the Anji Falconroth Madness deck, and that's Surly Badgersaur. For 3 and a red, 3/3 Badger Dinosaur. Whenever you discard a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on Surly Badgersaur. Whenever you discard a land card, create a treasure token. Whenever you discard a non-creature, non-land card, Surly Badgersaur fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. So, as you're cycling, you cycle creatures, Badgersaur gets bigger. You cycle lands, you get treasure, which is temporary instant mana. And then if you're cycling your spells, Badgersaur gets to get all fighty-fighty. So you can make this big, and then you can just start having Badgersaur slam your opponent's stuff and be a recurable, repeatable kill spell. So I think that's a really powerful. Obviously, in the Anji deck, it's going to do amazing things as well, but we're not talking about that right now. Up next, included in the deck, love that they reprinted this card because it was creeping up there in price. I think it was like $20-some before the reprint, but that is going to be the Locust God. For 4 blue-red, you get a 4/4 flying. Whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue-red insect creature token with flying and haste. You can pay 2 blue-red, discard a card, then, or you can pay 2 blue-red, draw a card, then discard a card. And whenever it dies, return it to the owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Nice recursive threat that is also evasive, gets in for flying, and on top of that, is going to make you a lot of bodies. Every time you cycle, boom, make an insect, boom, make an insect. Suddenly, you got a board full of 1/1 hasty flyers that are either blocking all of your opponent's stuff, being able to gang block their good flyers, or pushing in for a bunch of damage. So, really do like that in here. Valiant Rescuer, for 1 and a white, you get a 3/1. Whenever you cycle another card for the first time each turn, or create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token, and it cycles for 2. Vizier of Tumbling Sands. For 2 and a blue, you can get a 1/3 that you can tap to untap another target permanent, or you can cycle it for 1 and a blue, and when you do cycle it, untap another target permanent. I didn't include any of the shenanigans that let you go do super weird things with this. I just figured it was a good utility spell, so being able to untap things like your mana rocks and stuff, and do just basic normal EDH shenanigans. I didn't want to push this into some sort of super combo, but that is there. And then finally, rounding out our last main board, our last creature is going to be the one that if you pull this off in a game of Commander, I'm going to be super impressed. Can this deck do it? Yes. Is it likely? No. But you can also just hardcast this later in the game. And that's Yadara Wandering Monster. For 5 or red, you get an 8/8 trample haste, cycles for 1 and a red. Whenever you cycle Yadara Wandering Monster, you shuffle it into your library from the graveyard. And if you've cycled a card named Yadara Wandering Monster 4 or more times in this game, put it onto the battlefield from your graveyard instead. Do this before you draw. So, again, are you super likely to get this pulled off as a singleton copy in a 100-card Commander deck focused around cycling? Probably not. Will it be super spicy if you do? Will everyone at the table be surprised? Hell yeah. And that's why we added this card to the deck. Plus, he's not an expensive little upgrade. He's currently sitting at a pre-sale price of like $3. So, not hating on Yadara at all. Artifact-wise, comes with the deck. Abandoned Sarcophagus, probably one of the most important artifacts for this deck, other than another one we'll get to in just a sec. 3 mana artifact, you may cast non-land cards with cycling from your graveyard. If a card with cycling would be put into your graveyard from anywhere and it wasn't cycled, exile it instead. So this basically just extends your graveyard cycle cards into a hand, so that way into your hand. So you can cycle them in the early game, and in the late game you can just recur them onto the field if they're creatures or enchantments, recast your instants and sorceries, and not worry about losing that value from cycling cards that maybe later you might need their effect. The other card that I mentioned that is Fluctuator. They reprinted Fluctuator in here, and that is fantastic. It's a 2 mana artifact that cycling costs you up to 2 generic less to play. So that can reduce a lot of cycling costs down to maybe 1 or free. So that way post Gavi, after you get your free cycle off Gavi, then you can do more things. Another cool thing that they did here was they put so many good mana rocks in this deck. Right out the gate. Arcane Signet, Azorius Signet, Boros Signet, Izzet Signet, Soul Ring, Commander Sphere, and Regurin Crystal. All those included. Signets are always heavily needed for reprint. They're just some of the better mana rocks that you can play in Commander that are accessible to pretty much everyone in the format. And the more that they print them, the more accessible they become. And even better when they're included in the precon, because then the mana base is just that much better out of the box. Commander Sphere, I left those in for this cycle. They all felt pretty good. Again, you can replace that with a better mana rock, or if you have another pick for this deck that you'd like to include, go right ahead. We did keep the one Planeswalker it comes with in here, and that's Chandra Flamecaller. For 6 mana, you get a 4 red, 4 loyalty Planeswalker that you can +1 put 2 3/1 red elemental creature tokens with haste onto the battlefield, exile them at the beginning of the next end step so you get some attackers, or most importantly, pay 0, discard all the cards in your hand, and then draw that many cards +1. It's a self-inflicted wheel that also ticks you up 1 card in value. So it's basically a redraw on a bad hand with a additional card to help dig you a bit further. Also, finally, -X, Chandra Flamecaller deals X damage to each creature. So you can build her into a Wrath if needed. On to the enchantments. We were mentioning the blink shenanigans earlier. Let's get into those. We are playing Astral Drift. 2 and a white for an enchantment that whenever you cycle Astral Drift or cycle another card while Astral Drift is on the battlefield, you may exile target creature. If you do, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step, and it cycles for 2 and a white. Also, Astral Slide for 2 and a white. You get an enchantment that says whenever a player cycles a card, you may remove target creature from the game. If you do, return that creature to play under its owner's control at the end of turn. Now, what's lovely about both of these cards, these do not say your own. So you can blink out your opponent's attackers if they would be coming at you. So this is a nice little way to discourage your opponent from attacking you, but also you can do things where I was mentioning earlier, like blinking out your Spellpire Phoenix or your Sun Titans on your opponent's turn after they go to their combat step, they don't do anything. Okay, blink this Sun Titan. It exiles till end of turn. When it comes back, reanimate, blah, blah, blah. And the nice thing is Sun Titan even reanimates the Astral Drift, Astral Slide. So if they remove it, get it back. It's great. There is, you can obviously you can make a few choice cuts that are maybe not the most optimal things to be playing in here for things that will blink better with Astral Slide, Astral Drift. I chose to not, again, make this the most hyper of competitive, but a good solid upgrade. Trying to keep in the most of what the original deck idea was and just kind of refining it enough. I don't want it to be, starting to get into the 7s or 8 categories, but this is at least a solid 6 list in my opinion. And then let's go on to, we have Cast Out, a nice little 3 and a white flash. Whenever it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Cast Out leaves the battlefield, and you can cycle it for 1 white. Crystalline Resonance, probably one of the best cards in the entire deck here. For 2 and a blue, you get an enchantment that whenever you cycle a card, you may have Crystalline Resonance become a copy of another target permanent until your next turn, except it has this ability. So being able to just be super flexible and have this turn into whatever you need it to be that is on your board or on your opponent's board, you can just do some very, very silly things with it. Drake Haven, for 2 and a blue, you get an enchantment. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, you may pay 1. If you do, create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying. And keep in mind you have enough things that you're going to be reducing your cycling cost to practically free. So this might be cycle a card for 0, pay 1, get a 2/2 and draw a card. So for 1 mana, getting a 2/2 flyer and drawing a card is really, really good. Escape Protocol, again, more of the blink shenanigans. But this one costs you a little bit of mana, but in turn you don't have to wait until the end step to get it back. It's just a 1 and a blue enchantment. Whenever you cycle a card, you may pay 1. When you do, exile target artifact or creature you control, and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So blink it in, blink it out, and right back in. Get that value on an ETB. Hoofprints of the Stag is included in the deck. I think it's a good little way for this deck to generate some threats. Whenever you draw a card, you may put a hoofprint counter on Hoofprints of the Stag, pay 2 and a white, remove 4 hoofprint counters from Hoofprints of the Stag, and create a 4/4 white elemental creature token with flying. Activate this ability only during your turn. So it is a little slow, but it is repeatable 4/4s with flying that just keep coming back. Lightning Rift, 1 and a red. Whenever a player cycles a card, you may pay 1. If you do, Lightning Rift deals 2 damage to target creature or player. So again, it's kind of like the Savai Thunder main, but for 1 less mana, but you don't gain the life. So just again, more repeatable little damage sources. And when you're cycling for free, paying 1 isn't that big of a deal. This puts you literally like every time you cycle, you can get a free shock, but generic mana. Seems pretty decent. New perspectives, 5 and a blue for an enchantment that says when it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. As long as you have 7 or more cards in hand, you may pay 0 rather than pay cycling costs. So obviously this is the biggest one. Next we have a nice little uncommon from Ikoria that wasn't in the deck, but I added it in because it fits really nicely, and that is Ominous Seas. For 1 and a blue, you get an enchantment that whenever you draw a card, you put a 4 shadow counter on Ominous Seas, remove 8 for shadow counters to create an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token, and this also cycles for 2. So clearly you can see how this plus Hoofprints of the Stag can really stack up to start spitting out big, beefy threats. We also got Reconnaissance Mission for 2 blue. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. Cycles for 2. Reprilian Reflection, 2 and a red. Whenever you cycle a card, you may have Reprilian Reflection become a 5/4 dinosaur creature token with trample and haste in addition to its other types until end of turn. So nice little evasive threat that can just get in for surprise damage or be a good blocker. Also reprinted from Modern Horizons in here is Tectonic Reformation, 1 and a red for an enchantment. Each land card in your hand has cycling red, and this also cycles for 2. So this is going to make it so all of your lands cycle for 1 red mana no matter what, which can help cut the cycling cost of some of your other lands that normally cycle for, 2 or 1 and a color or blah blah blah. Finally, the last 2 enchantments are probably the 2 best. The first one being Shark Typhoon. Gotta love this card, doing bonkers things in standards right now, but it's a 5 and a blue for an enchantment that whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's converted mana cost, and you can cycle this for 1 blue and X. Whenever you cycle Shark Typhoon, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying. And then finally, Unpredictable Cyclone. For 3 red, if a cycling ability of another non-land card would cause you to draw a card, instead exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a card that shares a card type with that cycle card. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost, and then put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way onto the bottom of your library in a random order. So this gets really bonkers, because this lets you stick Unpredictable Cyclone, and then let's say you just cycle Valiant Rescuer. Okay? Exile cards from the top of your library till you hit a creature. Now there are tons of different creatures in here that you could hit. The ceiling level is really high. You could hit like Asperia or Niv Mizzet and just get those cards for free. You could hit Yudaro and get an 8/8 Trample Haste just slammed into play. Same goes for the enchantments. Or so very, very powerful there. Also, sorceries and instants. You cycle a sorcery, dig until you get a sorcery. Cast it for free. Seems really good. Especially when we get into some of those. So let's go ahead and do that now. Instance first. One of the best cards of the deck. The current TCG player average for this card as of recording is sitting at a thick $60. Will cause this deck to be bought just for this card. And that is Fierce Guardianship. For 2 and a blue, you get an instant that if you control your commander, you may cast this card without paying its mana cost. Counter target non-creature spell. This is bonkers. You get rewarded for having your commander with a free counter spell. Yes, it doesn't stop creatures, but you get to stop so much more with Fierce Guardianship. You can linchpin combo pieces. You can have a protection against a wrath. Like, this just does so much. Next we have Hieroglyphic Illumination. Just a little instant speed draw spell. 3 and a blue, draw 2 cards, or cycles for 1 blue. Neutralize the counter spell out of Ikoria. 1 blue counter target spell, or cycle it for 2 generic. Starstorm, red X, instant speed, deals X damage to each creature. One of a few wraths we have in here. Also cycles for 3. And then finally in our instance, the one that's been tearing up standard in the cycling deck, that has basically been their win con. Obviously you're going to include it here because it can swing the game in your favor very quickly, and that's Zenith Flare. For 2 red-white, Zenith Flare deals X damage to any target, and you gain X life, where X is the number of cards with cycling in your graveyard. So this very easily can just dumpster one opponent out of the game, and then give you the life total to make it so your opponent can't swing out on you, because you'll survive and you could kill him on the crackback. So again, fantastic card. Finally, into our sorceries, we have Akroma's Vengeance. 4 white sorcery, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. And it also obviously cycles for 3. Boon of the Wishgiver out of Ikoria. 4 blue, sorcery, draw 4 cards, cycles for 1. Included in the deck as well is Decree of Justice. White, 2 X, and double X. So remember, each 2 mana you pay into the X makes 1 X. Put X 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield, or cycle this for 2 and a white. And when you cycle it, you may pay X. If you do, put X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield. Keep in mind that cycling is an ability. It can occur at instant speed, meaning you can make the 1/1 portions of this at instant speed during, say, an opponent's end phase, or declare attackers. Descend upon the Sinful. 4 white, exile all creatures. But Delirium, put a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying into the battlefield if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. And with you having every card type other than your 1 planeswalker having cycling, this is usually really easy to do, and it gets around indestructible because it exiles, and that also means any graveyard decks who have any key pieces on the battlefield are losing those permanently. Slice and Dice, 4 red. It deals 4 damage to each creature, where you can cycle it for 2 and a red, and you may have it deal 1 damage to each creature. I'm not super big on this card, but it seemed good enough to keep in for now. May pull this in future upgrades. Windfall, obviously, it's the blue wheel, and you want that in this deck. Finally, we have 2 cards to talk about. First one being reprinted in this deck. Absolutely Absolutely amazing card. Going to be the third card that really sells this deck. Fierce Guardianship is the main card of this deck. Like, if you're buying this deck just to get one card, you're buying it for Fierce Guardianship. After that, the Surly Badgersaur is going to be a very good card in specific decks. This is another one of those cards that's going to be played in everything that has access to it in white, and that is Dismantling Wave. For 2 and a white, for each opponent, destroy up to one target artifact or enchantment that player controls. So in a 4-player EDH pod, for 3 mana, blow up 3 artifacts or enchantments, 1 for each opponent. Pretty good rate. Or you can cycle this for 6 white. When you cycle Dismantling Wave, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. This is Cyclonic Rift level power here. And what's even better is if you're playing Gavi as your commander, you get your first cycle for free. And cycling is an ability, so it's an instant speed. So at any point, just artifacts and enchantments, no more. Somebody has, just too much oppressive stuff out, no more. Break it all. So this is just a bonkers amazing card. Finally, my last add-in, the one that's going to maybe make your opponents all hate you, get hated out of this play group, your friends never speak to you again, because there's always one with me, and that is Decree of Annihilation. 8 red sorcery. Remove all artifacts, creatures, lands, graveyards, and hands from the game. Everybody, we're playing top deck. What you got on the top of your deck? Is it good? Do you have lands? No, because I exiled them? Okay. Did you draw lands? Cool, you're playing a land, but you're not doing anything. If you do this to your opponents, they're not going to like you. However, it also cycles. 5 red, whenever you cycle Decree of Annihilation, destroy all lands. Now, I do agree with something Pleasant Kenobi recently said. Do not play cards that stall the game just for the sake of stalling the game. And this seems like one of those cards, but there is a reason you're doing this. You have a way to pull ahead if you cycle this. So what you do is you float all your mana, and you need to have Herald of Forgotten in your hand. You get your first cycle for free off Gavi. You cycle your Decree, you blow up everybody's lands, but you floated the mana to cast at least Herald of the Forgotten. Now, you're playing a ton of lands in this mana base that have cycling, and Herald of the Forgotten just says return permanents with cycling abilities from the graveyard to the battlefield. So then you slam this into play, your opponents don't have lands, and you get a bunch of lands back. Now granted, most of the cycling lands, if not all of them, enter the battlefield tapped, but still, you've blown out all of their mana, or if they have a few mana rocks, most of their mana. You do something bananas, like maybe follow this, or predicate this before you do this with maybe a cycled Dismantling Wave during your opponent's end step, blowing up all the mana rocks and enchantments, and then do this, your opponents are tilted off mana and stuck with only creatures. So, really do think this is a bonkers card to add in here for the combo potential with the Herald of the Forgotten and Gavi. You need to have all that together, and maybe don't just do this for the sake of doing this unless your play group has made you super angry, or they've put you down to 1 life and then refuse to kill you, and you need to remind them that they need to kill you because you are always a threat. So, going into the lands, I don't normally go into the lands, but this deck comes preloaded with a bunch of lands already that you want to be playing, and the upgrades to this are pretty simple. It's going to come with pretty much every land that has cycling other than the new Triome, because they want you to buy Ikoria. So obviously pick up the cycling Triome for this color scheme. Regurin, or Regur, I don't know. Weird magic terms. The only other thing I did was I chopped a couple of the basics and a couple of the other lands for more effective duels that are the on-color shock lands and check lands. And then also, where is it? I did keep in the desert package. You do get a scavenger grounds and the hostile desert. I almost said the angry desert. But those do come in the deck, and I did just leave those in because you're also playing Desert of the Fervent, Mindful, and True. So that seems fine. But most importantly, if there was any one land to pick up other than the fixing lands that I added in, if you don't want to pick those up, they're too expensive, that's fine. But do get a Hall of Heliod's Generosity. It works really well in this deck. Being able to pay 1 and a white to tap it and put target enchantment card from your graveyard on top of your library lets you recur a lot of your cycling enchantments. So you can get back things like Astral Drift, Astral Slide, Hoofprints of the Stag, Ominous Seas, Reconnaissance Mission, Shark Typhoon, Unpredictable Cyclone. It's just another way to recur those. And maybe even just to cycle them again for their added value. Like maybe you just want to be able to set yourself up to the correct line is be able to have a Shark Typhoon in hand so you can make a big shark to try and close out the game after you end up taking everybody's stuff away with the Decree of Annihilation. So that's going to be the deck. Deck list in the description box down below, link to the tapped out, as well as my other social media. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know, what do you think of the deck? What are some other changes you would make? Do you think I should just cut Portal Mage for the Dream Trawler? I think that might just, now that I'm recording this, that dawned on me, that might just be the better line. But let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.